Hey everybody, it is time once again for another Rahdo Q&A. And hello everybody, I'm about to answer a bunch of questions submitted by folks like you to the email address questions@rahdo.com. And by all means, folks, if anything I talk about or my wife talks about, because she sometimes shows up on these as well, prompts any further questions from you, well, you know what to do. Questions@rahdo.com is the email address. Keep them coming, folks. I want to hear your cues so I can am. And speaking of which, let's get right to it. But, folks, I'm going to talk about several different topics today, and if any of them don't really strike your fancy, don't worry. There are links down in the show notes that let you jump around from question to question so you can listen to just the parts you're interested in. All right, sound good? Then let's go.
2. According to the stats, the ranking of your top 10 games in 2023 is the 4th best year. Like you said. Oh, yeah. So for folks who don't know, if you go to top.rahdo.com, right, it lists how I rank every single game by year. If you scroll, let me go back to it for people who are watching instead of listening. Although, man, you know what? Oh, it occurs to me. No. People are watching the Q&A, right? Okay, let's come back to top.rahdo.com. Where are you? This is so hard to do on a tiny screen. Anyway, yeah. If you scroll down to the bottom, you will see best years based on what this website does for me is it takes for a year that has 10 games in it. So it can say a top 10. It adds up and divides by 10 those games to get an average score of what my top 10 is, right? Not an average score of my ranking, but instead, if scroll back up in 2010, Twa is my number 1 game. It's also my number 6 game of all time. And my number 10 game, Adlung Land, is my number 40. And my 5th best game is Predaporter, my number 74, my 74th best game of the year. So 2010, if you were to think in terms of my top, the top 10 games of 2010 are in my personal top 100, right? It's really cool. I love this site. I am so happy with it, how it turned out. And it's because of this that for me, in my taste, 2019 is the greatest game of year of all time, and 2023 is the 4th best year. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here. Then coming back to Wally. Right. I myself have the feeling that it's a good year for gaming, 2023, but not a year with truly top-tier games or games that are going to be around for classics. Well, that's just you, buddy. I disagree strongly. Okay, before we go on, let me see what classics. How 2023 has no classics. Scrolling back up to the top, bringing it back up here. Beep, bop, boop. Earth is a classic. People are going to be playing Earth forever. Earth is going to be a perennial. Earth has the chance to climb into the BGG top 50, maybe even the BGG top 20. Actually, I'm curious. Where is Earth right now? It's my number 23 highest ranked game of all time. If we go there, it is number 193 on the Board Game Geek. And I suspect once it gets an expansion, which it's going to get this year or next year, it's going to keep climbing. It's going to make it to the BGG top 100 of all time, easily. Evenfall. Dude, you haven't played it. Evenfall is phenomenal. Evenfall is it's my number 31 best ranked game of all time. I mean, let's just look at this. 8 of my 10 favorite games of all time, of the 8 of the 10 best games of 2023 are in my personal top 100 of all time. I have, over the last decade, played about 4,000 games, give or take, 3,000 to 4,000 games. I don't even know how many. I've covered over 2,000 of them on my channel, and there's a lot of games I played that I don't cover. Anyway, so that's a huge deal. Only Barcelona and Nemalia don't make it into my top 100 of all time. Rebuilding Seattle, I think, is one of the, and here's the deal. You can say, Rebuilding Seattle, that's not going to be a classic. Well, that just means you don't love tile-laying games as much as I do, because I think it's one of the best tile-laying games of all time. It's easily in the top 10 best tile layers of all time, period. Archaeos Society. And here's the deal. Everybody raved about, I don't know what to tell you. I think these games are phenomenal. I will agree. Galileo Project, my number 4, is my 45th best game of all time. That game got passed over. People didn't notice it. I think that is too bad for them. But just because 5 years from now, other players won't be playing Galileo Project, in no way, shape, or form makes Galileo Project a worse game. games that are absolutely phenomenal, bonkers, amazing, like Galileo Project, get overlooked all the frickin' time. There are many, many games that aren't in the Board Game Geek Top 2000 that are amazing games that deserve more love and attention. Is that their fault? No. It's just the fault of there's like 10,000 new games that get added to the Board Game Geek database every year. Of course, not all of the amazing, wonderful standout games are going to catch the eye of everybody. And that's too bad. But, I think these games are phenomenal. And they will be games that I will happily talk about 5 years from now, even if the rest of the industry doesn't. But honestly, I think White Castle, if White Castle gets ongoing support and gets some expansions, I think it has the potential to have legs. Evacuation might, if Vladimir Suki didn't just keep bringing out amazing game year after year after year, but he kind of does himself in. Evenfall, I think, could be remembered as one of the all-time greats. Evenfall is probably top 5 greatest. Evenfall is better than Race for the Galaxy, quite frankly. Race for the Galaxy is grandfathered into one of the greats of all time. If Evenfall came out the same year as Race for the Galaxy, everybody would remember Evenfall, and nobody would remember Race for the Galaxy. That's a quirk of timing. That has nothing to do with the quality of the game. So anyway, with all that, let me go back and continue reading your very thoughtful, and I'm very much enjoying. I know I'm sounding pretty ranty, but I'm really enjoying this one. Anyway, though. Right. I looked again at your top games, and now I've used the metric ranking of your top 3. Only the best 3 games of the year as opposed to the best 10. Following this metric, 2023 is the 10th best year out of 18 years. All right. And then it looks like you made a table, justifying that. So this maybe hints that my feelings could be correct. What are your thoughts on stats and results, knowing this is how your preliminary top 10 looks now? So let me scroll down. Yeah, I love that you did this. This is absolutely fantastic. Oh, looks like I need to shrink it a little bit so it'll fit. There we go. Okay. So, the greatest, if you were to judge the quality of board game years relative to each other based only on my absolute creme de la creme, the greatest games of all time, then 2011 is the greatest year, followed by 2016, followed by 2012, et cetera, et cetera. So that is interesting. Here's the problem with this approach. And then you put, Earth down here. First of all, there's 2 problems with this approach, Wally. As you know, in my top 25 games of the year that we're talking about that sponsored all this, I haven't played all the games of 2023. There is still every chance that some of the games that I'm hoping to play in the new year might push 2023 even higher. And that, quite frankly, just one game from 2023 that, say, maybe goes into my top 50 is going to make it on your list. It's probably going to make 2023 jump by like 4 or 5 steps from just one game. And that's why your approach, I think, Wally, fails. Because if there's one thing that is more important than anything else in the world of statistical analysis and data analysis, it is big data sets. You can make stats say anything you want, provided you cherry pick the data and you go for smaller groups. You see this happen in political arenas all the time, where people will say, oh my gosh, look at the crime rates. Yeah, because you're only looking at the crime rates in this one tiny little narrow way, as opposed to looking at them as an overall trend, across an entire country, as opposed to, one state or one county for just 3 years where it dropped up and you say, crime is going out of control. Because you're ignoring that, every place else where crime is at an all-time low. And that's why bigger data sets are better, Walt. And so, yes, you could say that 2010 is demonstrably better than 2019 if you narrow your data set to a much smaller thing. But I would say you are not getting a true representation of the relative merits of these years to years. And that is why, ultimately, looking at the 10 best games of the year rather than the 3 best games of the year gives one a better overall sense of how good that year was. Right? I mean, you can agree to disagree, and that's totally fine. But I do not believe you will find any statisticians or people who engage in statistical analysis will say, what's always best to do Get your data size as small as possible, because that will be a true reflective analysis. It's the exact opposite, buddy. Quite frankly, what we should be doing, heck, if you don't mind doing it, is what does this look like if you consider the best 20 games out of each year, right? You can't talk about as many years, because obviously going further back, there are just fewer games. But that's going to give you an even better and more representative relative breakdown of all the years. The more data you bring in, the better. Because, hey, once you go to the top 20, then you're starting to talk about games that I just think are kind of, they're okay. And so you'd have games really dragging down the averages. When you're only looking at the top 3, you're only, right off the bat, you can see how can you judge a year relative to another year if you don't talk about the bad games? Limiting it to the top 10 is already kind of skewing the data. Limiting it to the top 3 skews it even more. So that's the problem with your methodology. But honestly, Wally, I think it's amazing that you went and did it. I'd be curious to know how they look. But I think the more games you bring in, and again, don't forget, all of this is meaningless, because these are all defining how good a year is based on my personal predilections, which of course don't mean anything for a lot of people. Anyway, though, but it was a lot of fun. Thank you, Wally. Question 3. Can you talk about games that you haven't had a chance to play? Oh, yeah, so you do remember that. Which games of the ones do you see potentially making your top 10 if you had to guess? Can you make at least a top 3 of the best of these candidates? This is right. And so, yeah, again, for Wally did the research. He saw that I talked about other games that I really want to play that I haven't played. They are Plantanubo, Daybreak, Earthborn Rangers, Mythwind, Ancient Knowledge, Guild Academies of Valeria, Globetrotters, Arborea, Delta, Darwin's Journey. Man, I can't, man. The ones I haven't played, I really can't. It's just impossible. Here's the deal. I very, very strongly think Ancient Knowledge has of all of these, Ancient Knowledge is very likely to hit my top 10. It's very likely to knock out whatever my current top 10 is and be replaced with Ancient Knowledge. I have a very high level of confidence about that. Actually, Earthborn Rangers, after having watched Maggie's video of it, Maggie just put a run-through up on the channel, I'm pretty confident Earthborn Rangers won't make it into my top 10 at all. In fact, after watching Maggie's video, I kind of lost interest in chasing it down because Luck of the Draw played a bigger part in the game than I thought it did, and I was kind of disappointed by that. So I would actually take Earthborn Rangers off this list. I would give high likelihood to Ancient Knowledge. Maybe Plantanubo, maybe Daybreak. Here's the deal. For the ones I have played, Globetrotters, I suspect when I get home, because I'm so kicking myself, Wally. I own a copy of Globetrotters. It's on my shelf at home. I should have put it in the RV. So I should have played it while I was actually out trotting the globe. I think Globetrotters is very likely to push into my top 5 of the year for 2023. Very likely. And Arborea, kind of hard to say. I only played the prototype. I know prototypes change. I don't. Delta, maybe, probably not. Darwin's Journey. Here's the thing about Darwin's Journey. Darwin's Journey by itself, probably not. I really, really dug Darwin's Journey when Jen and I played it. But I understand that when it came out, it also came out with an expansion, and I rate things based on the quality of the game plus the expansion wherever possible. And supposedly, that expansion so elevates Darwin's Journey above the base gameplay. I remember Tom Bassel saying I would never play this without Darwin's Journey, and so if what I've heard is true, that Darwin's Journey plus the big expansion that was made available as part of the Kickstarter, that might push it in. So to answer your question, I'm going to give high potential for Globetrotters, Darwin's Journey, and Ancient Knowledge. Medium potential for Plantanubo, Daybreak. Lower potential for Mythwind, Guild Academies of Valeria, although I don't want to rule that one out. But anyway, that's how I'd rate those based on what little I know about them now. Alrighty. And you end by saying, sorry for the not so fluent English. Wally, you did fantastic. Absolutely amazing. Okay. Anyway, though, let's move on to Top. Top says, hello. Hope your 2024 is going well. I'm still enjoying the podcast, even though I don't have the bandwidth to enjoy any of your other content. Well, hey, I'm glad you're enjoying it, Tom. Believe it or not, I'm only 3 months out of date. For folks who don't know, the last time I heard from Top, I think he was like over a year behind on the podcast. So it was always funny to watch him responding to stuff from a year ago. Anyway, though, he's almost caught up. Currently listening to the October 2023 podcast, and here's some questions. Sometime back, you were discussing whether co-op games can all be considered solo games. We consider only those games without hidden information, like Pandemic. Right, yeah, I mean, if there's information, then of course it's not implicitly solo. Of course, you need to play with somebody else to hide the information. But unlike you, my gaming group has no problem with the number of players if the number of players doesn't match the number of characters. Oh, yeah, the general thing, yeah. For example, I played Pandemic Legacy 3.5 times. 2.5 times with Season 1 and once with Season 2. And I always play with 4 roles, but with anywhere from 2 to 7 players. How does that work? 7 or more players. So do you just break the rules and say, oh, we're playing with 7 players, so 7, you bring out 7 characters? We don't have any alpha players. We're very cooperative. The whole thing is a giant, right. So if you're just saying, yeah, if there's 7 people playing where everybody's just discussing, yeah, okay. So you're effectively playing a solo game of Pandemic where everybody shares control of the 4 characters. Yeah, I get that. I know there are people who do that, totally. And I think that's great. If you've got a group that can work with that, that's fantastic. Because like I said, you don't have any alpha gamers. The whole thing is a giant puzzle. Each game is its own puzzle. The meta game is another puzzle. And we're all trying to figure out the best sequence of actions characters can take. We enjoy the discussing strategies and trying to figure out the overall solution, thinking several steps in advance rather than focusing on the current game. See, now that's the interesting thing. That's going to create, if you were doing that, that's going to create such a different thematic scenario. Because if you think about the role you are in this game, if there are you and 6 other people all playing Pandemic, forget about Legacy, just even regular Pandemic, all playing Pandemic at the same time, sharing control of those 4 characters, then you literally are playing the role of upper-level management in the CDC, all back at HQ, in the command center, watching everything happening on the big board. You see this a lot in NASA films and stuff like that. And you're all a team. None of you are out in the field. Literally, based on what you are physically doing in the real world, collaboratively trying to figure out what everyone should do and then issue orders to all your agents out in the field, you are literally role-playing that. And I think that's very cool. There have been some games that actually do that. I'm trying to think of them. I can't think of them off the top of my head. I'm terrible thinking of games off the top of my head. But I dig that. If a game literally sets out to purposely, Dungeon Alliance is one of those. Dungeon Alliance is a game where you do not take on the role of a character. You take on the role of a disembodied voice controlling multiple characters. And that's kind of the way the game is designed. And you made that your Pandemic experience too. I think that's great if it works for you. Personally, I'm sorry I'm interrupting what you were saying, but personally, I could enjoy that as well. Make no mistake. As you say, we find this to be very engaging. I could find it engaging too. It's a big puzzle. It's a really cool puzzle. But I personally find it less enveloping narrative for me to project myself into if I am role-playing some, disembodied, team leader back at HQ. To me, it is more fun, it is more engrossing, it is more exciting to imagine, I am literally the one jet-setting from Jakarta, getting on an overnight flight by burning cards so that I can get back to DC and stop this outbreak from happening, or find the last spit, or rendezvous with you, in Jakarta. Did I already say Jakarta? In Hong Kong or wherever. I personally find that to be a more compelling and fulfilling and exciting role for me to imagine myself in, rather than being a general back at HQ issuing orders to people who do all the cool, exciting stuff. Nobody, fantasizes about being the middle manager. Everybody, kids grow up imagining being a firefighter because they want to go out and fight the fires, do the cool, exciting stuff. They don't imagine them being the firefighter captain who just stays in the rig and just gives orders to everybody. That's implicitly less exciting, a fantasy role to fulfill. But if you and your group are enjoying it, that's awesome. Don't get me wrong. I can enjoy it too. I just won't enjoy it as much as pretending I'm actually out in the field. Anyway, though, for Pandemic Legacy in particular, it feels like playing with 4 characters a deeper, richer experience, gameplay-wise and story-wise. If you're looking for a different type of story, but for me, it is, I could see it a more engaging experience as a puzzle to solve, but less engaging as a thematic exercise. And to me, both of those are equally important. It's also a plus, and then just 2 characters. Here's the thing you're missing out on. One of the things I love about Pandemic, or in really any game where I'm a person in the world and I'm working with Jen, it feels so much heroic with just 2 people saving the world, just me and Jen, as opposed to me and Jen being back at HQ giving orders to other people, and there's actually a team of 4 people running around. That is just less heroic than 2 people fighting against the odds, somehow overcoming insurmountable challenges to save the world. To me, that's a cooler, more exciting narrative and a cooler, more exciting story, and that I want to project myself into. But it's great that you enjoy it in a different way. It's also probably much more challenging. I believe you expressed the Pandemic Legacy is just too easy. Yeah, I can totally agree with that. I mean, Pandemic is always, any version of Pandemic is easier the fewer players you play with, which is why Jen and I found we always have to bump the difficulty level up. Because of the way they do scaling. They do a good job of scaling, but at the end of the day, Pandemic is more challenging with more players than less. Anyway, so continue on. If you're worried that this will reduce the immersion, perhaps you can imagine in-game, not only as a world situation desperate, but also short staff. So each person has to juggle multiple roles, multitasking. That's interesting, but that doesn't hold up when you're playing with 7, does it? You can't imagine that. I appreciate you're trying to engage me where I live, but I would agree with that if you follow the original Pandemic rules, which everybody forgets about. Back in 2008, when Pandemic came out, there was a hard and fast rule. Everybody has to keep their hand secret. You can talk about what's in your hand, but you can't show. Nowadays, the rule is literally everybody put your hand of cards on the table. I kind of disagree with that. I mean, it was originally implemented as a, an anti-quarterbacking, an anti-alpha player thing that, it's harder for alpha players to ruin the fun for everybody. They literally can't see everybody's cards. But to me, so if you went back to that, where, I had to talk to you about my cards, but all of that, I understand why they changed that rule, because it does just kind of get in the way and slow things down. And in your case, where you're trying 2 people to control 4 players, and I have to look at 2 separate cards, that would just be impossible. Anyway, imagine you and Jen each having an intern. See, now, actually, I really dig that. That's one of the things I love about Oathsworn. Oathsworn, no matter what, there always have to be 4 heroes in the world, right? There always have to be. But if you're playing a 2-player game, we each have our 2 characters, and then there are 2 other characters who play in like a really simplified version. They're kind of our interns. I think that's brilliant, and I've seen it in other games as well. If Pandemic did that, if Pandemic had a simplified or automated version of the pilot or whatever, I could see that. But it's not. I am controlling multiple characters, at which point I am neither of these characters. I'm a general. It's fine. It's just not what I'm interested in. Anyway, given the above, if you were to play Pandemic Legacy, would you consider playing with 4 characters? It's tough. No. What I would do, if I were to play Pandemic Legacy again to increase the difficulty level, I talked about this in my final thoughts, I would just, you can basically increase the difficulty level of Pandemic by doing a tiny bit more administrative work, because all you need is just like 1 or 2 extra Epidemic cards. So, I think Pandemic Legacy only came with 4. Actually, the simplest thing is have 2 copies of Pandemic Legacy. And so you have extra Epidemic cards, so you can just put them into one deck and increase the difficulty level like it should have been in the base game. That's what I would do. Because honestly, for me, half of the experience of Pandemic is those heroic moments. Me zipping across the world because it's me doing it, as opposed to me or issuing orders. So that's the problem it comes down to. But anyway, if not, how much of your objection is due to immersion, difficulty of balancing multiple rules, other factors? It's all about immersion. It's 100%. I'm your game. I am less interested in playing. I am less interested in imagining I am an armchair general rather than boots on the ground hero. That's basically what it comes down to. But a side note, I never play Pandemic, whether Legacy or normal. When I create whenever I play Pandemic, when I create player cards, I keep them as several mini decks with 1 Epidemic per deck. I don't merge them back into a single deck. It just makes it easy to keep track. Oh, yeah. You and me have both. We totally play like that. Anything that gets rid of memory elements is okay in my... Here's one thing I should mention to you, in case you don't know about, Wally. The Pandemic Express games or Pandemic Hot Zones, did you know that if you want to play a 2-player game of Pandemic, you can combine Hot Zone North America and Hot Zone Europe into a game that is literally designed from the ground up to be played the way you're playing it, where you're controlling multiple characters across multiple maps? It's really cool. I do like it. I like it there more because the game isn't quite as big, I guess. It's, because it is a smaller game, and when you do that, suddenly it feels like, oh, we're playing a full game of Pandemic, but controlling multiple characters. You might want to look into it if you hadn't. Anyway, thanks. I'm sorry, that wasn't Wally. All of that was Top. Thanks, Top. Okay, to move on to Ramon, who says, the trip is looking incredible. Questions. With your extensive background as a professional board game player and reviewer, I'm sure you developed effective strategies for learning new games, particularly when faced with less than stellar instructions. Could you share any specific techniques or strategies that have helped you learn new games more efficiently and make the process more enjoyable? I've totally done this, Ramon. Just within the last few episodes, I've done this. But I couldn't tell you what episode. Let me see if I can find it for you. If I go to studio.youtube.com, right? Let's see here. Oh, and I might as well show you for folks who are watching. Righty. Bip-bop-boo. Dee-dee-dee-doodly-doo. Where are you? Right. Okay. If I click that, and if I come into the studio, hey, here's I'm pulling back the curtains behind the scenes. Anyway, I need to search description, which is something it's a real shame people can't do. If you can't search the descriptions of videos on my channel, it's kind of criminal that you can't. But anyway, I can because it's my channel, and I need to look for, what would I have said? I'm going to say learn. Hopefully learn is how I titled this. Let's see. We search. Rahdo learns. All right. Okay. And, here it is. The how much do I make per video? Right. So this was episode 100, which I didn't even bother to celebrate. I didn't do anything special on episode 100 of my podcast. But here it is. One of the questions in episode 100 was how best to learn a game. And that was me basically breaking down exactly what you're asking, Rebellin. I talk about all kinds of techniques and strategies to wrestle good rule books and bad. Even good rule books could be better. And I basically hack rule books when I read them now. So that, because the board game publishers can't be bothered to write rule books in a smart way, well, I can read them in a smart way. And go check out episode 100 of the podcast, and I lay it all out there in great detail.
And that will be the end of this session of the Rahdo Q&A. Thank you, folks, for watching and also for submitting your questions. Send me more to the email address questions@rahdo.com, and I'll get you covered in a future episode.